Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My fabulous co-host is Laura Blackwell. I hope that you're all healthy and safe, reasonably sane, taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. And we're still in pandemic. We're still shut in. We're still locked down. And we're still looking for distraction and entertainment and maybe something a little bit more than that. So the Story Hour turns to an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is a few folks sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. So every week we have two authors, about 30 minutes each, and we do exactly that. And every week we offer a couple of brief PSAs provided by the authors, suggesting how, if you're in a position to do so, you might help your communities. So our readers tonight are Meg Elison and Gabriela Santiago. Meg is reading tonight for People's Breakfast Oakland. PBO is a grassroots Black socialist political organization which serves the houseless community essential resources. Founded in 2017, the organization has fed, provided clothing, and hygiene packs to over 5,000 Oakland residents. I really love the local scale of this organization. For more information or to find out how you can help, email peoplesbreakfast@hellablackpod.com. Gabriela is reading tonight for Pangea World Theater. Pangea illuminates the human condition, celebrates cultural differences, and promotes human rights by creating and presenting international, multidisciplinary theater. PangeaWorldTheater.org. So if you're here via Zoom, please mute your mic, but feel free to leave your camera on if you're so inclined. Feel free to use chat. We love to see that activity here at the readings. Unfortunately, our Facebook Live friends, we can't see your comments, but feel free to comment as well. We have a great program tonight, so let's get right to it. Gabriela will be kicking us off. Gabriela Santiago is a Clarion grad and member of Team Tiny Bonesaw, whose work has previously been published in Clarkesworld, Strange Horizons, The Dark, and Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet, among others. Really great venues. A performer with such Twin Cities institutions as Patrick's Cabaret, Raw Sugar, Outspoken, Gadfly, Queertopia, and Mother Goose's Bedtime Stories. She's also the founder and curator of Revolutionary Jetpacks, a science fiction cabaret centering futures imagined by BIPOC, queer, and trans and disabled artists. She's writing 3 novels and needs to be persuaded not to start a podcast. You can follow her at Life on Earth 89 on Twitter. So take it away, Gabriela. Thanks so much for being here.
6 sandwiches to place inside a pentagram to summon me to your presence. Dear Cam, 1. Bread and butter. The bread should be cheap wheat bread, too soft, but also too crumbly, so dry that it sticks in the mouth without the addition of butter. It doesn't have to be butter. Margarine is fine, or better. If you get your butter or margarine in a plastic tub where it curls to form a belly button, then swirl your knife around the belly button, saving that beautiful center for last. Use just 1 piece of bread and fold it in half. Dunk in milk before eating. I survived most of my first 7 years on bread and butter dipped in milk. Everyone always chopped off the belly button of the butter first thing. So do this for me. Okay, Cam? There's something like genetic memory in the taste of bread and butter. Something where you can feel your ancestors stretching out behind you like a wool blanket around your shoulders, sitting in their peasant huts and eating what was probably better bread and better butter since it was local and fresh, only less of it, always less of everything. But still, that brief moment of comfort, the sweet trace of honey in the dense give of the bread, the fat of the butter sticking to your bones and shutting out the cold. Their milk would have been warm too. It'll be a while before we have real bread here. We're still doing tests on the kinds of wheat that grow best in the dome, and we're still fiddling with the bug numbers. The other day, the gravity went off, only for 5 seconds, but it messed the spiders up like hell for the rest of the day, and we think some of them died of the shock. My team's arguing about what bees to unfreeze first. It's probably going to be classic honeybees because we have the biggest supply of them, but there is a faction arguing for some of the smaller wild bees to help diversify pollen spreading, which I personally think is a mistake since we're not sure how the bees are going to adjust to navigating. We think they navigate primarily by local landmarks, but if they've been using the stars or the sun or the moon this whole time, we're going to be pretty screwed unless they have got the best learning curve ever. No butter, of course. Gen Ed's dairy line is still at least a decade in the future, no matter how fast they fuss with the embryos. Maybe we'll have oat milk in a year, but did you know it has 17 grams of sugar? That's more than a candy bar. I feel like I'm just eating candy bars sometimes. No matter what the ingredients are, they always seem to load up the rations with beet sugar. I don't know if it's to cover up the taste or keep up the energy or keep up morale. Everything's sweet and chalky. They load it up with calcium supplements too. I guess this all sounds like I'm complaining, but it's not all bad. The work keeps me busy and the air here is purified. No bad days like when the breeze off the Mississippi makes you reach for your inhaler. Remember that time you were just wheezing and I had to prop you on my handlebars and pedal all the way to Children's? The wait in the ER was so long that we just went home when you stopped. Dad says you're keeping busy with the apartment algae farm for your work credits to graduate. I'm so proud of you. Love, L. Dear Cam, 2. Peanut butter and cheese. The bread doesn't really matter here, cheap or fancy, as long as it's wheat. The peanut butter matters even less. Have you ever met a bad peanut butter? No such thing. I prefer crunchy, but I know you might be starved for choice right now with the grocery stores sold out of pretty much everything except the top line mixes. You could try checking the farmers markets for the raw peanuts and crush them in my old molcajete. Look for the mung stalls. Lots of kind of cheese work, but the absolute best will be a sharp, bright orange cheddar, or mild. The important thing is how you eat it. Squash it flat, then peel off the crusts and eat them first, dipping them in milk as necessary to soften. Then, using your fingers to measure out straight lines, nibble away to create a perfect rectangle. Peel away, or if the texture of your bread does not cooperate, nibble away. One side of the bread and then the other. Roll the remaining peanut butter and cheese into a ball of sweet, comforting fat that can be devoured in 3 bites. This is how I have always eaten peanut butter and cheese sandwiches. This is how I eat them even now. Well, I guess how I ate them before I left. There is such security in doing a thing the way you have always done it. A small handhold that you do not have to let go. I have let go of so many things that it would have terrified me in childhood. You know, because we were the same child in so many ways. Or do you? I was a teen, the same age you are now, when you were born. I remember how you cried at foods touching on the plate, at specks of brown and white rice, at plans that changed after you had been told how your day would go. I heard you cry and I wanted to tell Dad to stop yelling at you, that you couldn't help that you felt the cruelty of the world so keenly in the way I always had. It was never the touch, the specks, the yellow bus instead of the blue train. It was always the change and the fear that it might spread to everything, that all this solid world might be a lie, that if things could not go exactly as we planned, that they might fall apart. Was that what got you into all this pentagram stuff? That there might be some greater plan? Don't worry, I'm not going to make fun of you this time. I don't think I ever told you, but I wanted to be a goth in high school. Would have been if I could have afforded it. The black boots with the silver chains, the lace corsets, the thigh boots with an infinity of snapping buckles like ultimatums. If I'd had the money, I'd have eaten up everything in Hot Topic with a spoon. Once, after a protest, I fixed myself this sandwich. I hadn't been hungry on the way to the protest. I had chicken and waffles for lunch. Or during, I was filled with adrenaline, but as soon as I got home, I came down from the high of chants and whistles and stomped feet and music, and I was ravenous. I had been heckled by counter-protesters on the way home. They called me a fat lesbian who hadn't been able to get laid in high school. I remember mostly feeling confused that our country had gotten to this point where our languages had so divided that they could perceive these things as insults. I turned around and said that just because they had never stood up for anyone in their lives didn't mean that everyone else was the same. One of them said, "I stand up for my own. Who do you stand up for?" And I said, "Whoever needs it." And I took the cold train home to the apartment, and my hunger erupted in the cold apartment, and I tried not to wake you and Dad as I opened the cupboards for bread and peanut butter and cheddar and a paper plate and a flimsy knife. I ate the sandwich with chamomile tea, and I listened to you and Dad sleep, and I was tired, but I felt alive with the comfort of the familiar as I took it into myself. And I thought of all the counter-protesters screaming hate in the name of a God I had not been able to believe it since I was younger than you. And it seemed to me that they felt the comfort of that hate like a blanket. And I chose the comfort of peanut butter instead. I said to myself in that way of sleepy thoughts that makes them seem profound even if they are absurd, that if their God was hate, then my God was peanut butter. Anyway, I guess that was pretty ridiculous and probably more ridiculous than your goth thing, so I guess I'm saying sorry for laughing at you like that second to last time I saw you, and I'm saying I'd like to hear more about how you got into it and what you like about it and what else you're into these days. I know it's probably a busy couple months with the work credit thing and also the ACT and the SAT coming up. Are you still pretty dead set against going to the community college? That's fine. It's a good program, but you should go somewhere you want. And I know Dad has the carbon credits for it if he gives up the motorcycle for a few years. Love, Elle. Dear Cam. 3. Mrs. Bunny Sandwich. You can get nice bread for this one if you want, but it has to be toasted. Spread one side with mayo and bacon. Try Cecil's or Holy Land for beef bacon if you don't have a local hookup for pork yet. I just read about another case of trichinosis in Wisconsin. Spread the other with peanut butter and a crunchy lettuce. Butter lettuce or a nice red romaine. Good lettuce, none of that iceberg crap. Cut it into triangles and serve. I know it sounds strange, but if you give it a chance, you will love it. It's a wonderful play of taste and texture, the crunch of the lettuce and bacon and toasted bread, the smoothness of the peanut butter and mayonnaise, the umami and salt playing against the toasted grains, playing against the refreshing, sweet, light tang of the greens. It was named after Mrs. Bunny, its creator. You remember my first girlfriend, Diane? Her mother and aunts and uncles worked for a woman called Mrs. Bunny through all their college years. I never met her, she was long dead, but I imagined her house like a page out of The Secret Garden, peeling paint, waterfalls of ivy over steep gables, mysterious nooks with crumbling concrete statues whose marble originals were in some faraway museum. Weeping willows whose branches you could pass through like a veil between worlds. Maybe fall down a hole into wonderland between the roots. Maybe find a fairy door nestled in the base of a trunk. I guess a part of me has always wanted to escape to another world. You won't remember this, but Diane used to invite us sometimes to celebrate Mrs. Bunny Day, a holiday that fell 1 to 7 times a year, whenever the whole family wanted to get together and eat this particular sandwich and listen to stories of the koi in the old fountain, the Persian rugs in the study, the strange things Mrs. Bunny used to say, like an old wizard in a fantasy novel that always made sense later. We have new holidays here. I'll have to time these letters so you don't summon me before blossoming. That's another holiday irregularly scheduled. We can mostly predict it, but plants are stubborn. I think sometimes more stubborn than us, more eager to survive, and at the same time more determined to die if they don't get their way. Look at me talking about plants like they're people, but they become people to us up here. There are so few people up here. You get tired of people. You want them to be quiet like plants, and at the same time, you're so lonely. You wish the plants would speak to you. You wish they'd say what they want, unfurl their leaves and whisper across the room how you angered them, what it was you said or did, what you have to do or say to get them to forgive you, how you can help them grow. You wish you could explain to them that it's not all a selfish wish for continued life and sustenance, but that you love them, that you've held them when they were small, and it terrifies you to see them grow and wilt and maybe pass back into the soil from where they came. Do you remember last Christmas? How the warm weather had fooled the trees into putting out buds, and then the rain came down cold and fast, and until all the trees in the park looked like a forest of glass. They made a sound like wind chimes in the morning and bass drums in the afternoon. When the weight became too much and the branches crashed to the ground. What do the trees in the park look like now? Please write when you can. Love, L. Dear Cam. 4. Tomato and sunflower seed sandwich. Cheap wheat bread. This sandwich works best when the other ingredients can seep into the bread and hold it together, so it needs to be softer than a pillow. The kind of bread you can smush into a ball, but don't do that. Spread with mayonnaise, sliced tomatoes. Any kind of tomato will do. The tastiest heirlooms for the sandwich are green zebras, or pineapple, or pink brandywine, or black beauty, but the very best tomato for this sandwich is a sweet, tasty little cherry called Sun Gold, like pure drops of sugar, so irrepressible it splits on the vine. Once you've covered the bread with little yellow half moons, pour sunflower seeds. Roasted salted is best, but other kinds will do in a pinch. Pour them on top. Pour a lot on top. You're not done until you have a hill of sunflower seeds shedding strays to the side. Put the top piece of bread on, mash it down to hold it together, and cut into quarters. Squares this time. 'This is the taste of summer. available only late August through early October, sometimes not even then. Remember how last summer we paid for the heat of the coast with cool rains in the Midwest until the bottom of my shoes rotted away and I had to wear your big black boots for a week? It was even harder to tell us apart then. You taller, your face a little more square, but both of us bespectacled, curly-haired, dark and quiet. I never did tell you how much I loved how alike we looked. It seemed like something Dad could never. Oh, you know how he is. He always wants you to achieve so much. He always had such high hopes for you, even before you were born. Even before we knew you were going to be born. You've made this sandwich before. Maybe I didn't need to leave the instructions. Maybe I could have just said tomato sunflower seed sandwich and you'd have known. Do you remember how I would make these for you after school in early fall? You'd tell me all about your day. I'd tell you a story and make you tell me one back. I'd hold you upside down and swing you in a circle 10 times and tell you to do your homework. You were so smart even then. You'd finish it all in 10 minutes. How did the tests go? I hope they went well. I saw an article about the algae tank in the Star Trib. They mentioned your name, but they didn't quote you, and I couldn't find your picture. I think memory is a kind of a spell. You know I don't believe in spells, but I hope you know I don't think you're stupid for believing in them. I would never think you're stupid. Do you remember how worried you got about global warming when you were 7? You came home and cried. I remember being so proud of you for understanding when so many adults couldn't. Do you remember how I hugged you? I told you it made sense to cry. Love, L. Dear Cam, 5. The hell beast I made when I was 9. This is not a good sandwich. All the others were good sandwiches, yes, especially the Mrs. Bunny one. But this one is not. It is supposed to summon me, after all. And I am human. And all humans are messed up and flawed, and we do things that make no sense, and we hurt each other with so little thought. Yesterday, I was talking to Dad on the 8-minute phone, and he was so angry that I wasn't going to be home for the march. And I said, what good did the marches really do anyway? And what I meant was that there were a lot of ways we could all fight and they could all help, but how it came out was that I thought he was wasting his life, and it wasn't true. I wish I could be at the march, Cam, I do. But I only seem to be able to fall short of things and lash out. When you were very little, I whispered into your ear that I was sorry that he was all you had, and that it was okay to hate him. And even though you didn't speak English yet, you looked at me with such shock. And I have never forgotten it. How the words, I want to be a balm, are always a weapon. And here I am writing to you anyway, but I never wanted to hurt you, Cam. I only wanted to find a way to not leave you, not entirely. Why haven't you written me, Cam? This sandwich can only be made when you are so hungry and bored that it is the only thing about you anymore. If you didn't make this sandwich, you would do something else bad because the house is empty and you have read all the books and the heat advisory has auto-locked the doors to prevent children from going outside. It is peanut butter, and then cheddar, and then Parmesan shaken out of the green container in the fridge door because that's a cheese too, and then maple syrup because you know peanut butter goes well with honey, and maple syrup is the closest thing you have to honey in the cupboard, and then anise seeds because of those Norwegian cookies you made last Christmas for a class project that were delicious as long as you remembered to keep them locked up tight in their Tupperware, and if you didn't, they became as hard as rocks, teeth-shattering, stomach-rending boulders. The first bite you think will be fine. The second is a little cloying. The third is too much. You overstepped and took too much of what was good too greedily, as if not tasting everything meant you would starve. You cannot bear to bite down on the fourth and fifth and sixth bites because you know it will only get worse, but you know you have to because you have already used up precious resources and you cannot waste them because that will be a sin and that will be admitting your mistake and that will be change, a change that is all your fault that you could have prevented if you had just stopped and thought. This sandwich doesn't have a name because I've only made it once, but let's call it the Hell Beast, because that's what it is. An orgy of excess and poor decisions and regret. We can see the forest fires from up here. A quarter of the world is a cloud of ash. Can you even go outside right now? Maybe you were right. Maybe I could have helped stop this if I stayed. And you were right that this was cowardly to run away. I wasn't thinking. I was so tired, Cam. I could not bear it any longer. The long grind of hopelessness and the pressure of 1 billion hateful eyes and Twitter comments telling me I was less than, that I should die. I think sometimes we all should. Humanity, what a failed experiment. Who told us we could conquer the stars? Who told us conquering was the point of anything? I entered the calculations wrong, and we lost half our genetic data for einkorn wheat. Something is wrong with the tomatoes. We've adjusted and adjusted for heat and moisture and soil composition, but they won't sprout. Stupid dreams born of Butler's earthseed and the kind of escapism she could never write. Somehow I read all her parables and I didn't get that things change. I thought I could control how things change. I thought I would never have to give anything up, especially not you. I don't want to limp away while watching Earth die, but I have signed papers and committed to this course and will not be allowed to waste the precious resource of rocket fuel, even if I admitted that I am afraid. Do you remember when you used to have such vivid nightmares? Was that real? Cam, if you don't write, this is your big sister then. 4 letters of fluff and passive-aggressive begging. And then this, the truth, failure. There is no 6th sandwich. You have enough to see me clearly. This is all I am. I'm sorry. L. Dear Cam, 6. Banh mi! I forgot banh mi, Cam. How could I forget banh mi? Do you remember the last time you let me hold you without embarrassment? You were 13. We had banh mi in the fridge from IFO, fresh cilantro and jalapeno and tender slices of spicy pork meatloaf. We slouched in the big beanbag chair with crumbs of French bread collecting on our chins and globs of spicy mayo falling on our laps. It's not an authentic food. Neither of us is authentic. Authenticity is something we chase like stars, and we fill our bellies with delicious compromise. When you were done, you read me your story while you leaned into my side, my arm around your thin shoulders, the softness of your hair, something I have never forgotten. I don't have any instructions for this. I don't have time for instructions. If I did, you'll need to use your Xfinity minutes to Google something or make a new friend. I don't know. You love learning. You'll do great. My friend Kat figured out the tomatoes. They needed the sun. How do you forget the sun? But we did. We filtered too much. Maybe we'll get skin cancer now, but that's the risk you take for a taste of home. There are white and yellow flowers peering up at the dome now. The engines are warming up. The 8-minute phone is tied up. And anyway, I know you're at the march. I hope you have your extra inhaler. I hope you read this letter, even after the last one. I am sorry about the last one. I hope you will not remember me like that. It's true, but so is this. Cam, I think maybe there is no such thing as good or evil in this whole universe, only moments and decisions. Only love like air and mistakes like thorns pricking our skin and catching us. I think there is only people, only us. Our sharp, spiky edges, our 5 hours of sleep, a lyric repeating in our brains, the taste of peanut butter on our tongues, our hands swinging uselessly at our sides when we have forgotten how to hold on. I think there is only this, over and over, only life and death, and the seconds in between that made it all worth it, where we felt love, and that love, all the mistakes we can never take back, but we wish we could, even if everyone else will make them again. Find some banh mi. It's so good. I won't taste any here for years, but I will hold the memory of it ahead of me like a star. Do you remember when I woke you to look at all the satellites falling like the stars? I love you. I will miss you every day. I will be awaiting your summons. Love, always. L.
Oh man, that was just lovely. That was just lovely. I love your voice, Gabriela, both your spoken voice and your author voice. It was a beautiful reading, a beautiful story. Thank you so much. Really have to sit and let that ring for a moment. All right, here we go. Gabriela Santiago, thank you. Meg Elison is a science fiction author and feminist essayist. Her series, The Road to Nowhere, won the 2014 Philip K. Dick Award. She was a James A. Tiptree Award honoree in 2018. 2020 was pretty much a shit year, except it was mitigated by significantly by 2 events, both of which were attributable to Meg. She published her first collection called Big Girl with PM Press and their really great outspoken author series. If you haven't seen that collection, run out and get it. It's transcendently good. And her first young adult novel, Find Layla with Skyscape. Meg's been published in McSweeney's, Fantasy and Science Fiction, Fangoria. As a former teenage boy, I think that might be the most exciting of your pub credits. So Uncanny, Lightspeed, Nightmare, and many other places. Elison is a high school dropout and a graduate of UC Berkeley. Find her online where she writes like she's running out of time. Take it away, Meg. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. If I had known how heart-wrenching Gabriela's story was going to be, I'd have brought you something funny. But as we stand, here it goes. This is called the War Dead. The young king knew that the spell would not come cheap. The wizened necromancer had refused his request 3 times, each time telling the long-haired and wild-eyed youth that the magic was not what he thought it was. It would not go the way he imagined. This power was not for him to wield. Each time, King Hagen, son of King Waylon, persisted. He dogged the sorcerer's heels as the man fed the ravens who lived on the cliff outside his enchanted cave, made himself breakfast of lamb sausage and brown bread, tried to sleep in the woven reeds of his humble bed. The king begged and promised. I am the only one who could wield this power, wizard. My enemies are your enemies too. Haven't you felt the mountain quake with their terrible explosives? Haven't you had your trade hemmed in by the occupation? They're in our streets, closing our churches. No one in this land is safe. They are rolling over us like a wheel. I don't have enough men to rise against them. We're done. We are no more. Please, please, sorcerer, I have no other choice. The wizard sighed tiredly, his thin chest rising and falling beneath his robes. Cadamus, he said wearily. What? Hagen was distracted just for a moment from his request. The old man's voice was dry and brittle, as if coming from a throat that was always thirsty. My name is Cadamus. My father was General Almantor. He served your father in the last great war. Hagen's storm gray eyes lit up. Then you must understand, my father and yours fought them too. They kept the enemy out of this valley for decades. We could do the same if my armies were not so weakened. So I found you based on my father's diaries. I came to enlist your help. Couldn't we stand? Shouldn't we fight? Can't we be better than they were? We aren't, Cadamus said simply. They tried this too. They failed. And fighting in the usual way cost us so dearly. Why did they fail? Hagen was a boy king, barely old enough to grow whiskers. But his voice all held the full armament of command. He was not asking why, as a child does. He was asking why, as a man does, when he wants not only an explanation, but a promise to rectify a mistake. Cadamus sighed again. The old man sighed as a manner of breathing these days. He wasn't even sure it meant anything. It mattered little to him whether he was killed by an advancing army or by a little wet air in his lungs. You must break your sword. Your father wouldn't do that. Hagen said nothing, but went at once to the stone wall of the cave where the old magic man lived and swung his finely made ancestral weapon against the enchanted rocks until, at last, it shattered. He stood sweating, hands on his hips, breathing with the exertion of destroying a thing of terrible beauty. Cadamus began to feel something. It was like the light of a tiny candle flame inside him. It had never occurred to him, no matter how many times his father has told the story, that this might work one day. That he might have the chance to do what every wizard in his line, every king in his land had failed to do. In every generation there is a great war. In every army there is a man who believes he will be the one to end it all. And they always want the same spell. They always try to raise the dead. Hagen got his breathing under control and wiped his brow. He strolled to the old wizard, expectant. He was ready. You must cut off your hair. Hagen scoffed out loud and pulled the knife from the back of his baldric. He ran the razor-sharp blade upward at the back of his own neck and came with a loose handful of his own shining black hair, offering it to the seer. Wait, Cadamus said. Wait. If you're serious, I have to prepare. The young king stood in his place, but cut away more of his hair, bunching it in his fist as he went on. Cadamus rooted in a dark corner and found the cauldron that his father had used for his most serious work. It was older than iron, made of pitted bronze in the day when his father's father's father had served a tribe rather than a kingdom. A crude design of runes and bird feathers was barely visible around the rim. Its magic was profound, and it was not to be used for anything but the most dire of spells. Cadamus knew its time had come, its only time in his life. The mage spoke 3 low words, and the fire grew quite naturally on the floor there, rising like a blue and golden flower to hold the cauldron between its petals. Cadamus motioned to the young king to drop his hair inside. Hagen had been working the whole time and unhesitatingly dropped the thick, uneven sheaf of all his long hair into the unseen depths of the pot. He stood shorn like a little black lamb. He seemed younger than ever. He sheathed his knives and waited. No, you'll still need that. You must give of your blood, the blood of 1,000 kings, the stuff of life for which there is no substitute. Egan did not flinch, but pulled the knife a little slower this time. How much? It isn't a sacrifice until it's more than you wanted to give, Cadimus said in his father's voice. Egan breathed deep and put his left hand over the cauldron, ready to pierce it. No, Cadimus said, every novice makes this mistake. You might still have to fight. You will need your sword hand. Come closer. Cadimus wrapped his small, brown, leathery hand around the boy's white forearm and pulled him closer to the fire. He put his pointed finger to a spot above the elbow. Blue veins showed in the pale, mothered flesh. The boy was still as soft skin as a child. Here. To Hegan's credit, he did not flinch. He did not wait. He put the point of his dagger into place where the old man had pointed and punctured himself narrowly but deeply, cutting a notch into his arm that gave forth thick blood at once. Together they milked the arm, washing it with enough warm water to keep it from clotting. When Hegan swooned on his feet, it was enough. The cauldron was bubbling now. What else? Hegan was on the edge of sleep or unconsciousness. The sorcerer brought the boy tea with honey to revive him. He made him eat a little oatcake to regain his strength. Some of it I have. He turned his bony back and rummaged. When he returned, he was holding a handful of objects over the cauldron to be dropped in one by one. Battlefield dirt, soaked in the blood of men and women and horses, sprinkled with blasting powder, churned with anguish and the final cries of life. Into the steam it went. Ashes from a burned declaration of war. This was written by Olenwad, your third great-grandfather. He died in the first battle he himself had proclaimed. For those are the wages of war. Dead kings. Cadimus opened a small leather bag and poured hundreds of tiny bones in next. The bones of the forgotten. The ones who fight whose names are not remembered. The ones who receive no glory, their families no pension. The ones who had nothing to win and nothing to lose and only died as pawns in the struggle. Cadimus had his head lowered over the cauldron. He watched the contents intently, his deeply hooded eyes lit from beneath the fire. He looked up at his king from under his brows, blinking. Egan was waking now, up on his elbows. He came to his feet with an effort. His jaw was set. What else? What else can I give? You want this? Egan nodded. I need this. You need to raise the dead. The young king nodded again. The lost king. He did it. He's the reason why we hold this valley. His blood flows in my veins. He stood against the evil one, the one who would have ended us all. Men, elves, merfolk. I can do what he did. I can be as great a king as he. I can save us. Do you know how he was lost? Do you know why we do not know his name? Egan's face changed. Like all young men, he was confounded by consequences. He had no plan, only forward momentum. Is it because of this? Does it require the life of a king? It didn't kill him, Cadimus said carefully, but it changed him. So much so that he was never again the same man. His name wasn't lost by history. He shed it. He never spoke it again. He did not give it to his son. There was no named king so long as he lived. Do you understand? Do you see what you must give? Egan looked around uncertain. He swayed a little on his feet. How do I give you my name? How do I give up what I am? Cadimus stood tall. He spread his arms over the spell now as it boiled toward the peak of its power. He had filled out, his dry frame taking on mass and life, and he could hold his body at no other time. He was younger now, a man young enough to produce an heir to his art. Egan could see the vitality return to the man's cheeks and arms, filling up his robes, rising like the sap in spring. Simply say it. Come to the cauldron and say you will give it. Say that you will do whatever you must. Egan, son of Wayland, stepped forward and turned his face to the surface inside the ancient bronze vessel. He saw there a silvery swamp, bearing no resemblance to what he knew had gone inside. He didn't understand magic. He knew only that it would serve him, that it must serve him as a king. When his father had told him so, his father, who had failed at this exact moment somehow. Wayland's father had refused to break his ancestral sword. His grandfather could not cut his hair, believing it to be the source of his power and virility. That king's father had been unable to give his own blood, and so on and on it went. The litany of failures was a young king's inheritance, just as tenuously held as the throne, and the centuries-old war had been the same. Egan knew that he must not fail. I give it. I give my name. I give myself. I give everything I must to receive this gift. The wind was inside the cave now, howling out of nowhere, rising like a scream. Egan felt his shorn head cold in the blowing wind. He shivered with the chill of a man who has lost a lot of blood. He heard sounds of the battlefield rise all around him, the shrieking of war horses, the explosions of cannons. He heard grunts and groans of men and their exhalations of despair. The cold fell upon him as it does a man who is on the edge of death. He understood, as if the experiences of every man in his line came to him at once, what was required of him. Egan looked Cadamus in the eye. Cadamus achieved a striking, demonically hale state. He was as rosy as the full flower of youth. The old wizard nodded to the young king, feeling the moment rise at last. At last, the spell would work. Tell me what you want. Egan's voice was clear and high. I want to raise the war dead. I want the war dead. I want the war dead to rise from their graves. I want the dead to walk once more. What will you give? Cadamus's brown eyes were merry beyond glee. Now. It would happen now. Everything. I give beyond death. I will rise when I am called. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. The young man's surrender fell from his heart, white as a cabbage moth, and fell deep into the spell. It turned bright red when it struck the surface and broke open like an egg. The young king awoke to find himself at the mouth of Cadamus's cave. Cadamus was still plump and young, filling his robes with lively flesh. The king with no name shivered and shook, feeling small inside his clothes. He looked out over his valley. How will I command them? He turned a frightened small face to the old sorcerer. Are they bound to me through my sacrifice? You are bound to each other, Cadamus said, his voice rich and moist as cake. You've sacrificed the same. The young man searched for his confidence and his surety. He felt inside himself for the feeling he had had just a few hours ago, the one that told him what was right and wrong. He sought out that compass that pointed him toward victory, knowing which action to take always. The compass was gone. The surety did not come. He held his head high anyway and walked toward the village road that would lead him to the castle. The nights had passed and it was morning in the village. The young man was unrecognizable to his subjects. He had no hair and no sword, and the roughness of the night disguised the fine cloth as his soldiers' clothes. No one noticed him as he passed. How could they have noticed? They had awoken to 1,000 shades walking their streets, sitting in their gardens, laying in their beds. Widows had awoken to their husbands, returned, curled up and crying against the covers, present, distraught, conscious, and untouchable. Folks had found their grandfathers in the garden, tutting over the carrots and the rutabagas, waiting for someone to upbraid about the state of the comfrey patch. The midwife's cottage had 4 women in it instead of 1. An old midwife who had died in the last war was sitting at the table telling stories, wishing mightily that she might accept a cup of hot, milky tea. The young king passed the dazed ghosts of 2 chaplains in the streets, both of them knowing the other and trying to figure out where both of their churches had gone. They were wearing the sigils of faiths that had been overthrown and lost to time. The nameless young man did not interject into their conversation. He had no words. Dozens of ghostly children ran in the streets, calling to one another in the playground sing-song of 10 centuries, giggling and defying the schoolhouse with rude gestures. The schoolhouse sat where it always had. This was no army. The war dead were old women and orphans. Somewhere, surely, there were generals. Somewhere, ranks of soldiers stood awaiting his command to march into battle, deadly and untouchable. Frantic, the nameless boy ran to the barracks. He found his own soldiers there, mixed with the dead. The dead were young and old. They sat holding one another, weeping and comforting. He heard the living talk to the dead. He heard the dead calling to one another. Old friend, you died too young. Old friend, we should have been able to say goodbye. Brother, you died shitting in a trench, but we never told anyone that. Father, we died in the same battle. Friend, I married your widow, and the 3 of us have a son. Son, I never wanted this for you. There was no fight in them. They wanted to go home. They wanted to visit what they'd left behind. They wanted to cry for what they'd lost. Egan tried to rouse them, tried to issue orders. They heard him. They turned weary faces and waved him off. He pointed out the enemy's garrison, the soldiers stationed in the streets. They, too, were weighed down with their own ghosts. Every generation's uniforms moved in the unseen wind. No soldier of the occupation took notice of the king. No one living or dead had the time of day for the shorn, exhausted young man who had raised the war dead. Tired, defeated, the boy walked home. He found his own father sitting on the throne as if he had not been dead for 5 years. You did it, the old King Wayland said. The magic worked for you. The boy wanted to sit and take his father's hand, but he could not. He said anyway, looking up at the man who had died too young. This is not an army of the dead, the young man said. His voice almost broke, but he held it together. This is the war dead, Wayland corrected. All of them. They won't fight for me. They won't fight at all. I've failed. Wayland sighed and looked out the window. No. You've done what the lost king did. You saved us from this next war. This is all there is. No magical army of the dead that crushes the enemy, just the endless tide of loss. This is all there is. But the occupation, their army was supposed to be here tomorrow at dawn. Wayland reached out as if to touch his son. His fingers were made of dusty light and could not be felt. But the desire to touch, to be touched, held them together as firmly as any blood ever could. Your enemy awoke this morning with his dead general, his only love, in his bed once more. Nothing will make him leave that bed again. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Meg. That was great.
I thought those two stories went together very well.
You think? Yeah, wonderful work. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Gabriela. I needed to hear stories like this tonight, just personally. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us again for another week at Story Hour. Next week, we've got Randy Dawn and Max D. Stanton. So between now and then, please stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. And thanks, Laura Blackwell, my fabulous co-host. And we'll see you guys soon. Good night.